The night happened back in 2016, but I remember every detail of it as if it had just occurred. I frequently visit the woods just south of my town, usually 4 or 5 times a year. This particular weekend, I felt that urge to get outside and have some alone time. So I quickly packed my backpack and drove down to my favorite trail. Honestly, I'm not even sure if it was a formally marked trail on any maps. Nobody ever seemed to hike or camp there, so I really don't know if it was well known. I parked my car near the trees, grabbed my bag, and hiked for 2 hours to the end of the trail. This section of the woods wasn't hilly or mountainous. It was very flat and densely packed with trees. It would be great for a calm 1 or 2 day camping trip, but definitely nothing more, as it can get a bit boring. The campsite itself wasn't anything special. With several hours still left until sunset, I took my time setting everything up perfectly and starting the campfire. I relaxed, ate some trail mix, and just enjoyed the warmth of the fire and the sound of birds chirping. When the sun began to lower, I added more sticks to the fire. I always found it interesting how quickly the forest transitions from being so alive to becoming almost instantly quiet once the sun sets. I sat there listening to the quietness for only about 25 minutes after dark before a strange sound broke the silence. It was music. It was coming from a distance, quite far away, and sounded like some old classical song. It almost sounded like an old record player. I stood up and looked in the direction the music was coming from. Was there another campsite nearby? Maybe it was a group just playing music very loudly. I stayed at my campsite and listened for a while. It had to be at least 30 minutes. But what was so odd and honestly kind of eerie was that the song never changed. It was the same classical song on repeat, filling the quiet woods. I usually don't mind if other campers are nearby, having a loud bonfire party or whatever. But this felt different. Something was off, and I didn't like it. After those 30 minutes, I decided to walk a bit closer just to see what was going on. I didn't want to be intrusive, but I just wanted to make sure it was nothing weird so I could sleep that night. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the sound. It felt like I walked quite a distance, which made it even weirder that I could hear it from so far away. However, as I got closer and the music grew louder, something started to feel really creepy. I could feel goosebumps, and my heart was beating faster. It was then that I realized I'd only brought my flashlight. I should have brought my pocket knife or pepper spray, but I hadn't even thought about it. Eventually, I could tell I was getting very close. The music had to be coming from just 30 or 40 feet away, but I couldn't see anything. No bonfire, campfire, or any light at all. And then I saw it. A large speaker sitting propped up behind a tree. Nothing else was around it. I shone my flashlight everywhere, but there were no signs of anyone. I walked up to the speaker. It looked like an old one from the early 2000s. Basically just a big box with an old LCD display and worn buttons. I found the power button and turned it off. Suddenly, the forest was silent. The stark difference was eerie. Who did this? It almost felt like a trap. But even then, I made excuses, thinking maybe another camper left it behind, accidentally or something. Nothing really made sense about it, but I really didn't want to think the worst. I didn't stay longer than necessary. I hurried back to my campsite, feeling relieved to see my campfire and get back to the safety of my camp. However, as minutes passed, I couldn't shake a strange feeling that lingered, like something was still off. But I didn't know what it was. The feeling worsened until I remembered about my knife and pepper spray, thinking that having them nearby would make me feel safer. But that's when I realized what was off. Things were missing. My matches for starting fires, my cooking utensils, and both my knife and pepper spray were just gone. My body tensed up. Someone had been there. I didn't hesitate a second longer before packing what was left. As I did, I heard it again. The music playing from the darkness of the woods, closer this time, definitely not from where I'd found it before. I hurried, getting out of the campsite and running down to the trail. As I got further away and the music faded, I started to feel a little better. Still freaked out, but I figured whoever was out there had to be by the speakers, meaning I was getting further away from them. I hiked about 15 minutes down the path, now just walking through the quiet forest, far away from any music. And that's when I spotted something ahead, lying on the dirt trail. It was my stuff. The knife, pepper spray, utensils, everything that was missing. Someone had laid it out perfectly lined up in the middle of the trail. What was the catch? Before I could grab any of it, I heard a flurry of footsteps rushing behind me. I looked back, seeing only darkness. So I just sprinted away, leaving it all behind. I ran for what felt like 10 whole minutes, then continued jogging, fast walking for the rest of the way. Thankfully, I got out of that forest and back to the road. I really can't say what the hell I experienced that night. It feels like I barely escaped some psycho, almost like they were playing with their food. I haven't been back to that forest and I never plan to. Story 2. By Anonymous, I was camping alone on a trail about an hour north of Fairbanks, Alaska, near the White Mountains Range. I'd already been at the spot, set up with my tent, for 2 days. It was just past noon, and I'd made an early campfire, sitting around it and enjoying a meal when a man appeared. It startled me because I hadn't seen anyone, or even much wildlife, during the whole time I'd been out there. I also hadn't heard him walking up, or seen where he came from, whether it was the trail or just the wilderness. He looked like a typical camper though, with backpack gear and everything, and he seemed kind enough. He simply asked if I knew where the cabin was. Although I'd never been to the cabin he mentioned, I did know what he was talking about. Many trails around there have these public shelters, like small cabins you can use temporarily on your hikes. Usually they aren't well maintained and are just first come, first serve. During the 2 days I was at this campsite, I'd noticed a separate thin path going into the forest that I assumed led to one of those shelters. I told the man that if there was a cabin out there, it was probably down that path. He thanked me and walked away. I didn't think much more about it. I was just surprised to find someone else out there. I tended to the fire and relaxed for the rest of the day. This was the last night I planned to stay before heading back, so I just wanted to enjoy the scenery and calmness. It was probably 9 or 10 p.m. Around that time of year up in Alaska, the sun doesn't fully set. It gets dark, but not pitch black like in most other places. The sun was near the horizon, casting a shadow over the woods. When out of the trees, I saw someone walking toward me. As they got closer, I saw it was the camper from earlier. I was rightfully confused about why he was here, but he explained right away that he couldn't find the shelter. I said maybe there wasn't one. I really didn't know, but the man corrected himself, saying he never found the trail I mentioned and was hoping I'd show him where it was. I found it strange that he was gone for so long. If he never found the trail, why was he coming back hours later? What was he doing for that whole time, if not staying in the shelter? I initially just tried to explain again where the trail was, but he was kind of set on having me lead the way. He sort of guilt-tripped me, saying he didn't have a tent and was relying on that shelter for the night. I felt bad, and even though I didn't want to and found the whole thing a bit odd, I decided I'd just take him to the path. It wasn't far. Anyway, I slung my bag over my shoulders and started leading him there. Where I was sure I'd seen it was maybe a 10-minute walk through the forest. The whole walk there, the guy was pretty quiet. We both just walked without talking much. It felt like something had changed. 10 minutes later though, I found the trail. It was exactly where I said it was. There was no way he could have missed it. And even weirder, I could actually see the shelter far down toward the end of it. Sure, it was far, and trees blocked much of the view, but there's just no way he didn't find it from the directions I gave him. We walked a little closer, but the man didn't seem satisfied. I was expecting a thank you, but instead he said, this wasn't the right cabin. I didn't know what he meant. We kept walking, pretty much going right up to the cabin. It definitely didn't look in good shape, but that's the risk with these public shelters. You really shouldn't rely on them. This one looked worse than most, with broken windows, moldy wood, and just overall like it had been deserted for years. I realized as I was looking at it that the man had gone quiet. I turned around. He had stopped walking, standing maybe 10 feet from me, and holding out a knife. His face was stiff, and his eyes had a dead stare. He told me in a monotone, emotionless voice to go inside. I tried to ask what the hell he was doing, but he told me again, without answering, to go inside the cabin. My adrenaline was pumping. I was angry that he took advantage of my helpfulness, but also scared shitless knowing I was alone with him out there. I decided going into the cabin was probably the worst option. There was still some distance between us, so I dropped my bag and started running. Weirdly, I didn't hear him chase me. I looked back once I got further into the woods, and he was still just standing there holding the knife and staring at me. After I got further into the forest, I found a good place to hide, then stayed there for a while, probably 30 minutes. I hoped that was enough time for the guy to leave. Then, in the cover of the dark, I quietly moved through the trees and back to where the shelter was. The man was gone, or at least not standing outside the cabin like he was before. But my bag was gone too. I thought I was being smart by dropping it so I could run away faster. But since he didn't chase me, I felt like maybe it was a bad decision. I had basically everything in that bag. My phone, wallet, keys, literally everything. I quietly left the area and went back toward my campsite. I could feel my heart beating faster as I got closer, just sensing that I wasn't alone still. Then I saw it. The bright glow of a campfire burning right in the middle of my campsite. I thought by now it would have burned out. I walked a little closer, seeing my tent was still up. And from what I could see, the man was nowhere around. It was just the near silent woods with the quiet crackling fire. But then I saw my bag. It was sitting right in the middle of the campsite. Part of me really wanted to run up and grab it, but I also knew this was extremely suspicious. Why would he bring it back? He must have known I would go back to the cabin for my bag, and after not finding it, I'd then go back to the campsite. Even knowing all that, and that this had to be too good to be true, I was still about to run up and snatch it, when all of a sudden, the man appeared. He casually walked out of the darkness behind the campfire, tossed in some more sticks, and then sat down. I could hear him humming to himself too, like he was relaxed and just waiting. That's when I turned around and found the main trail, hiking through the dark all the way back to the road. It took me hours to flag down a car willing to help. I then notified the police and they went out to the forest with rangers in the morning only to find nothing. All my stuff was gone as if it were never there. Even the stones from the campfire were moved and thrown back into the forest like they were trying to cover up that it was ever even a campsite. The rangers also told me that the cabin out there was discontinued, meaning no rangers were taking care of it or servicing it anymore. That encounter left me really uneasy for a long time. I couldn't trust anyone. I've gotten better over time, but I can't help myself from thinking about what might have happened if I'd gone into that deserted shelter or tried to get my bag. I was likely one bad decision away from never leaving those woods. Story 3 by Hannah F. This happened just 2 weeks ago on a backpacking trip, the first one of the summer for me. As far as I knew, I was going on a very routine backpacking trip through a trail in northeastern Wyoming. The trail involved a 2-day hike there and a 2-day hike back the same way. I'd done many trails similar to this, so I went into it thinking it would just be a typical few days. I parked at the empty trailhead and started walking. The first few hours went well. The route was quiet, and I felt like I was making good time. I only had 3 miles left before I'd reach the first campsite, which I would actually just be passing through and going straight to the next 2 miles further, where I'd camp that night. Feeling a bit hungry and finding a nice spot for a break, I sat against a tree off the trail and pulled out a snack. I was just taking a breather, wanting to eat quickly and then get back to walking. But as I sat there, I happened to look up and see something kind of creepy. There was a guy standing in the woods off the other side of the trail, and he was staring at me, not walking or anything, just staring. I had no idea how long he'd been there. Almost as soon as I made eye contact, he lifted his hand and did this really strange wave, like he was trying to show he was friendly. But the wave was almost robotic. It was just really strange looking and creepy, especially with him standing out there staring at me. I decided to just stand up and continue down the trail. I was sure he was up to nothing, but I figured it was best to leave anyway. I didn't know why he was off the trail or what he was doing, and as long as I wasn't around him, I didn't care. Those next 3 miles were a little more difficult than I expected, taking me almost 2 hours before I reached the campsite. Like I said, this was the one I was just passing through. But with my break being cut short earlier, I decided to use this as a chance to make a bigger meal and take a longer break before making the final trek to my actual camp for the night. I set my backpack down and took out my mini propane cooker to heat water and make my freeze-dried food. I got it to a boil and poured it in. And as I was just waiting for it to cook, I heard footsteps coming down the trail. I looked over. It was the same man I'd seen in the woods. He had short black hair, a medium beard, and a gray flannel with blue jeans. He looked like he was maybe in his mid-30s to early 40s. As he walked up, I noticed he had a grin on his face, which I assume was supposed to seem friendly, but it definitely didn't. He must have started walking here right after I did for him to get here so soon. As he walked up, He said hello and started small talk, asking about the hike and whatever. I gave short answers, hoping he'd continue along the trail, but my heart sank when he came right up next to me and sat down. He was acting way too friendly to the point where it felt like he was being aggressively friendly, like there was no way he was genuine. He was really starting to creep me out. I tried to eat my meal quickly, but the guy kept asking me questions about it. At one point, he was jokingly mocking me for eating a homeless meal and said I needed better nutrition. He tried handing me an open protein bar. I kid you not, he pulled it out of his backpack and the wrapper was already opened, but no bites or anything were taken out of it. I turned it down, obviously, but he was being really pushy about it. Eventually, he gave up though, saying that he was going to be staying the night at this campsite too, so he would give it to me later when I was hungry. Hearing that was an instant relief. He was staying at this campsite. All I had to do was get out of here. I finished eating, then said my friend was waiting for me at the next campsite, so I had to go. The guy held his smile, but I could tell there was nothing behind it. His whole face was flat. He was just holding this ingenuine smile, and it was really creepy. I walked away, checking back a few times to make sure he didn't follow. I don't know what was up with that guy. Maybe he was just some harmless guy wanting to chat, but my gut told me to get away. So that's what I did. Another couple of hours later, I made it to my camp for the night. The sun was already setting, so it was getting pretty dark. And although I was tired, something told me to wait to set up my tent or really unpack anything until later, just in case I had to make a quick exit. Thank God I did, because not 10 minutes later, I heard those same footsteps crunching on the leaves down the trail. A moment later, the man showed up holding that creepy grin he had before. It definitely wasn't smart of me, but immediately when I saw him, I got really mad. I felt like I'd done everything to get away from this guy, and now I was pissed. He said he was staying at the other camp. So, what the hell was he doing here? Stupidly, I straight up asked if he was following, making it clear by the tone of my voice that I was serious. But the guy just jokingly laughed and said, "Yeah, I'm following you," like he was being sarcastic. He still had that stupid creepy smile across his face. He started asking if I was hungry after all that walking, but I quickly grabbed my bag and ignored him. Walking back the way I came again, I didn't see him immediately follow me, but I knew better than to trust that. I passed the previous camp, exhausted, but continued until I couldn't anymore. I was maybe a mile past the first camp. I moved off the trail. Honestly, I'm not sure how far off I even went, probably 200 to 300 feet, then discreetly set up my tent. I left almost everything still in my backpack just in case, then lay down and tried to sleep. Even with this really disturbing situation, I was so exhausted that I fell asleep surprisingly quickly. But in the middle of the night, my eyes shot open. I could hear footsteps crunching on the leaves right from where the trail was. It had to be him again, walking through the woods in the middle of the night, looking for me. The footsteps got closer, but then they started to fade out, moving further down the trail. He didn't see me. I waited until sunrise, then hurried back to my car. Thankfully, I never ran into him again. I don't know where he went after that. Honestly, I think I was disturbingly close to having something really horrifying happen. My encounter with that strange man could have been really bad. I think he had some pretty nasty intentions, especially the more I think about the protein bar he tried to give me and just the whole situation. It still makes me sick to think about.